guys, welcome to lesson 3. We are going to continue solving equations. We're looking at more and more complex equations kind of as we move along. Our goal is to make them as complex as possible before we quit so that you will be fluent in solving all linear equations. Excuse any ambient noise. I am at the aquatic center and watching swim practice for my kiddo. So let's go ahead and start some equations.
In this third lesson of Unit 2A, we're going to be looking at solving equations that have variables on both sides of the equal sign. So our learning target simply states that we'll be able to solve equations with variables on both sides of the equation. So let's jump right into some notes. Remember the steps from yesterday where we said we were going to distribute, then combine like terms, then get variables on both sides, and then solve using inverse operations. Today we're going to be doing equations that still use those same exact steps, but now we're going to be focusing in specifically on step number 3, not 2. I don't know why it says 2 there. So let's go ahead and do a couple of examples. The first one's pretty basic. It is just two simple expressions where we have variables on both sides of the equation. So step 1 is to distribute. Well, I don't have any parentheses, so no distribution is necessary. Second step is to combine like terms. We don't have any like terms on this side of the equal sign, and we don't have any like terms on this side of the equal sign. But the third step says that we need to put variables on the same side of the equal sign. Here's my equal sign right here. So I'm going to draw my little dividing line just because I think it helps me keep everything. Oh, if I could draw a straight line, that'd be great. It helps me keep everything kind of straight as I start moving things from side to side. So I'm going to take this negative 4n and I want to move it over here so that it's with this 9n. Well, if I've got a negative 4n and I want to move it, what I'm going to do is basically use inverse operations. I see a negative 4, so I'm going to add 4n to both sides of my equation. What this accomplishes is we have negative 4 plus 4, which, as our inverse property of addition says, gives us 0. So I'm going to not write that part, but that gives us 0. And 0 minus 15 is negative 15. On this side of my equal sign, 9n plus 4n is 13n, and I've still got that minus 2. Notice that I put the 4n right underneath this 9n. That's because those are like terms, so I want to make sure that I'm adding those and not trying to add this 4n to my constant over here. But by adding 4n to this negative 4n, it effectively gets rid of it over here, but because of that addition property of equality that says if I add on this side, then I have to add on this side, I just moved those 4n's over to the other side. And now I have a two-step equation. So now I'm going to get rid of this constant by adding 2 to both sides of my equal sign. When I add 2, negative 2 and 2 go to 0. And 0 plus 13n is 13n. That's again those inverse and identity properties at work. And then negative 15 plus 2 is negative 13. Now I see multiplication, and my last step is to use the inverse operation to undo that. So 13 divided by 13 will get rid of that 13. And over here, I have to divide by 13 as well because my division property of equality says that if I divide on this side, then I must do the exact same thing over here. I did that because 13 divided by 13 is 1. That's the identity property of multiplication. And 1 times n, I'm sorry, that's the inverse property of multiplication. And then 1 times n is the identity property. Negative 13 divided by 13 is negative 1. And that's my answer. If I wanted to check that answer to verify that it's correct, then I would go back into my original equation, and everywhere I see an n, I would plug in negative 1. So I'm only gonna do this on this very first one just to show you how it would work, but I'm gonna follow my order of operations. So I'm gonna multiply 9 times negative 1 and I get negative 9 minus 2. Over here, I'm gonna multiply negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4 minus 15. And then negative 9 minus 2 is negative 11, and 4 minus 15 is also negative 11. Because I ended up with something that is true, I know that this was the correct answer, so that's my solution. So it's nice to be able to do this. I'm not going to lie, I don't necessarily do it on every single problem, but especially if it was a complicated problem or I'm unsure about my answer or it's a really big test, take the time to check your answers. You can get 100 on this test. All right, so let's go over and do this one really quickly. I'm going to see if I can change there. Okay, so right here, my first step, as always, is to distribute. So I am going to distribute that negative 10 into the parentheses. Negative 10 times 1 is negative 10. Negative 10 times n is negative 10n. You could also just write it as minus 10n. Over here, I have negative 8n minus 30. All right, once distribution is done, I combine my like terms. I don't have any like terms on this side of the equal sign. I don't have any like terms on this side of the equal sign. So now I get to go to my next step, which is to move all the variables to one side. Now in this problem, I took this 4 that was on the right-hand side and moved it left. This time I'm going to go the opposite direction just to show you that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter which way you move it. So I'm going to go ahead and say add 10n. Because I see a minus 10n or a negative 10n, I'm going to add 10 because I want that term to go to 0. But if I add 10 over there, let me draw my little line, then I have to add 10n over here as well. Again, I'm putting it underneath my n term because I want to line up those like terms just to make my job a little bit easier. So negative 10n plus 10n goes to 0, and 0 plus negative 10 is negative 10. Still got my equal sign here. Negative 8 plus 10 is 2, so I have 2n minus 30. And now I'm to a two-step. I'm going to add my 30. If I add 30 to this side, then I have to add 30 to this side. Negative 10 plus 30 is 20. Over here, negative 30 plus 30 is 0, and 0 plus 2n is 2n. Again, inverse and identity properties work in here. And then I've got multiplication, so I'm going to undo that with division. If I divide by 2 over here, then I have to divide by 2 over here. 2 divided by 2 is 1, that's the multiplicative inverse, and 1 times n is n, that's the multiplicative identity, and 20 divided by 2 is 10. Now, if you're looking at a key, you're probably not going to see this answer. Instead, what you're going to see is n equals 10. Remember that we have that property that's the symmetric property of equality that says that equal signs are bidirectional. If 10 is equal to n, then n is equal to 10. It does not matter, not a single lick, which way you write this. All right, so let's look at some more complicated. I recopied these steps here just so that they were there for you, but let's look at this. It looks scarier, but if you follow those steps that we put for you, then it is going to be the same process. I'm going to start by distributing. There's no distribution to be done. My next step is to combine like terms. I do have like terms on this side of my equal sign. Remember that I'm just looking on a single side of the equal sign right now. So negative 10x plus 6x is 4x. Over here, I have a 2x and a negative 7x. Well, 2. And then I also have, let's use a different color, I also have 13 and negative 9. So I'm going to combine those like terms. 13 and negative 9 will be 4. 2x and negative 7x will be negative 5x. All right, so I've combined all my like terms, and now I'm ready to go to step 3, which is to move my variables to one side. I've got a negative here and a positive here, so I find that it's usually easier for me if I move those negatives over, because in the process of moving them, I'm going to use the inverse, and they get to become positive. Because negative plus positive goes to 0, and 0 plus 4 is 4. Over here, 4x plus 5x is 9x. Okay, my last step, I see multiplication, so I'm going to do division. Divide by this 9. and I'm left with x equals 4/9. If you put that in your calculator, you're going to get 0.444 repeating. Don't be afraid to just leave it as a fraction, though. There's nothing wrong with fractions. In fact, I think the answer is prettier as a fraction. So it really doesn't make a difference. Over here, first step is to distribute. So I'm going to say -2 times everything inside of this parentheses. -2 times 8m is -16m. -2 times 10 is -20. On the other side of my equal sign, remember that I'm cutting this in half and dealing with this side separately from this until we start moving things. So over here, I've got a -6. Make sure that when you distribute, you're distributing -6, not +6. So that 4 is just going to stay put. -6 times m is -6m, and -6 times 9 is -54. Okay, now I'm going to look for like terms. There are no like terms over here because this one's got m and this one does not. Over here, though, I have a +4 and a -54. So I'm going to add 4 and -54. And what I get is -6m minus 50, because 4 and -54 is -50. All right, now I'm ready to move my variables all to one side, just to show you again that it doesn't matter which way I move it. Over here, I took my stuff that was on the right and moved it to the left. This time I'm going to go the other way. Bonus points on this, because what this is going to do is make my end result be a positive coefficient in front of that variable, which I like, because -16 plus 16 goes to 0. 0 and -20 is -20. Over here, -6 plus 16 is +10. Isn't that nice? And then I've got -50. And now I've got my two-step. So I'm going to add 50 because I have -50. If I add 50 on one side, then I have to add 50 on the other. -20 plus 50 is +30. I've got 10m. -50 plus 50 goes to 0, and 0 plus 10m is just that 10m. And now I can divide by 10 on both sides. And I get m, and 30 divided by 10 is 3. And again, if you want to write it as m equals 3, it does not matter at all. All right. Good luck. There is both a practice as well as an application section for this lesson. You can just do the odds on the practice unless you feel like you need extra. Then once you take your mastery check, if we feel like you need more practice, we might send you back and look at some of the evens. But to start out with, just do odds on that practice. All right, let us know if you have any questions.